Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're zeroing in on something pretty significant in the AI space. NVIDIA's just dropped their Llama Nemotron series. These are open source reasoning models.
That's right. And we've got the research paper from Arkelkis, plus some performance charts to look at.
Yeah, so our mission today is basically to cut through the hype, understand what makes these models tick, and why you should care if you're trying to keep up with AI.
Exactly. It's not just what they are, but the implications, right?
Yeah.
Especially for enterprise applications. We want to unpack that.
Okay, let's jump in. Llama Nemotron. The paper calls them a family of heterogeneous reasoning models. What's the key thing there? Heterogeneous.
Right. So heterogeneous essentially means they're not built uniformly. Think of it like using different specialized tools for different parts of the job. They mix and match optimized building blocks within the architecture itself. The main goal is boosting efficiency.
Okay, efficiency.
Yeah.
And the other part is NVIDIA releasing them, open source.
Yes, and that's a really big deal. It's under an open license that allows for commercial use. So it's not just for researchers. Businesses can potentially use these.
Gotcha. And there are three sizes: Nano, Super, and Ultra.
Yep. They range quite a bit. Nano is 8 billion parameters, so fairly compact. Super is mid-range at 49 billion. And Ultra is the big one, 253 billion parameters.
Wow. And how do they, compare?
Well, what's interesting is the paper claims even the smaller Nano model holds its own against some, established state-of-the-art models like DeepSeek R1.
Really? Even the small one?
Yeah, which really points to that efficiency focus in the design. They seem to be getting a lot of performance out of the parameter count.
Okay, so efficiency keeps coming up. The paper talks about superior inference throughput and memory efficiency.
Yeah.
Why is that suddenly so critical?
Well, it's always been important, but maybe more so now. Inference is when the model actually does something, answers your question, generates text. High throughput means it can handle lots of requests quickly. And memory efficiency. Well, that means you don't need a supercomputer's worth of memory to run it. Makes them practical.
Right, makes sense. More accessible.
Exactly. Lower cost to run, easier to deploy on hardware people actually have.
Now, there's this feature that caught my eye, the reasoning coggle. Sounds different. How does that work?
Ah, yeah, this is pretty neat. It gives the user direct control over the output style during inference. You can basically tell the model detailed thinking on or detailed thinking off right in the system prompt.
So you can literally flip a switch for how much it explains itself.
Pretty much. If you need the step-by-step breakdown, the chain of thought, you turn it on. If you just want the answer quick and dirty, you turn it off.
Okay, that seems genuinely useful. Why is that flexibility a big deal?
Because different tasks need different levels of detail, right? For complex problem solving, seeing the reasoning is crucial. For simple chat, maybe not. This lets you optimize for the task and for resource use. You're not running the full heavy reasoning process unless you actually need it.
Like having different gears on the AI. Okay, I get it. And NVIDIA is really pushing the open source angle here. They're showing the Hugging Face logo, talking about their commitment. What exactly are they releasing?
It's quite comprehensive. You get the actual model weights for all three, Nano, Super, Ultra, and crucially, under that commercially permissive NVIDIA open model license agreement.
Okay, the weights. What else?
They're also releasing the entire post-training data set they use to fine-tune these models.
The whole data set.
Yep. And the training code bases, too. Nemo Aligner, Megatron LM. It's basically the full toolkit.
Wow, that's quite open. Allows people to really dig in, build on it.
Exactly. It fosters transparency and lets the community understand how these models were built and potentially improve them further.
All right, let's talk performance then. Figure 1, this Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index. It puts LN Ultra right at the top for open models as of April 2025. What goes into that index?
So artificial analysis is an independent group, and this index combines scores from 7 pretty tough evaluations. We're talking things like MMLU Pro, GPQA Diamond, which is hard science questions, coding benchmarks like Live Code Bench, complex math, a whole range.
So it's not just one thing, it's like an AI decathlon score.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it aims for a broad measure of intelligence across different challenging domains. LN Ultra leading that is a strong statement.
Okay. And figure 2, the table with all the benchmark scores. What jumps out at you there?
Well, looking at the reasoning benchmarks, specifically things like GPQA Diamond again, or AE, which is competitive math, even tool calling LN Ultra consistently outperforms other leading open models.
Even bigger ones.
Yeah, even models like Llama 3.1 4005B and DeepSeek R1 671B. On accuracy for some of these complex reasoning tasks, LN Ultra is ahead, despite sometimes being smaller in parameter count.
So the architecture and training really seem to be paying off.
It looks that way, especially in these areas requiring deep reasoning.
Now, back to efficiency. You mentioned LN Super and Ultra were optimized using this puzzle framework. Figure 3 has these puzzle piece graphics. Can you break down how puzzle works?
Yeah, puzzle is basically a neural architecture search technique. Think of it as an automated designer for efficient models. It has two main stages. First, it creates different versions of standard transformer blocks. These are the puzzle pieces. Some might have attention removed or smaller feed-forward networks, things like that. They train these variants.
Okay, so it creates a menu of efficient building blocks.
Exactly. Then the second step uses smart optimization mixed integer programming, specifically to figure out the best way to assemble these pieces into a full model architecture. It does this while trying to meet certain targets, like a specific inference speed or memory footprint on particular hardware.
So it's custom designing the architecture for performance on specific hardware.
Precisely. They explored lots of block types, removing attention, changing feed-forward dimensions, using grouped query attention, even linear layers instead of attention sometimes.
And what worked best?
For LN Super and Ultra, the paper says attention removal and compressing those feed-forward networks were particularly effective puzzle pieces.
Interesting. And for LN Ultra, the biggest one, they did something extra called vertical compression with FFN fusion.
Right. So after puzzle builds the architecture, you might have several feed-forward network blocks, FFNs, one after another. FFN fusion identifies these consecutive blocks and replaces them with fewer but wider FFN blocks.
Wider. How does that help?
It reduces the sequential depth of the model. Fewer steps to go through sequentially can lead to lower latency, especially when you're distributing the model across multiple GPUs, which you definitely are with Ultra.
Makes sense. And the paper gives some specific speedup number.
It does. For LN Super, which they optimized for a single NVIDIA H100 GPU.
Okay, a common high-end GPU.
Right. They claim a 5x throughput speedup compared to Llama 3.370B Instruct. And even if you run that Llama model on 4 GPUs, LN Super on just one is still over twice as fast.
5 times faster on one GPU. That's significant. What about Ultra?
Ultra was optimized for a full node, so 8 H100s. There, they're reporting a 1.71x latency improvement, meaning it responds faster compared to the very large Llama 3.1405B model.
So faster responses even compared to a model nearly twice its size.
Yep. They also mentioned token constraints, like how much context fits in memory, which is important for practical use. LN Super handles about 300K tokens cache at FP8, while Ultra can go up to 3 million at FP8.
Okay, and figure 4 kind of sums this up, the accuracy versus throughput chart.
Exactly. That plots GPQA diamond accuracy against processing speed. You see LN Ultra sitting nicely in the top left corner.
Higher accuracy and faster throughput.
Compared to DeepSeek R1 and Llama 3.14005B in those tests, yes, it's on a better spot on that performance trade-off curve. Though worth noting, the hardware wasn't identical for all tests. DeepSeek was on H200s there. But still, a very strong showing for LN Ultra.
So after they designed this efficient architecture with puzzle, they have to train it, right? What's post-NAS training?
Right. NAS is neural architecture search, so puzzle. After the search, you have the structure, but you need to train it effectively. They use knowledge distillation, basically having a larger teacher model help train the smaller, efficient one, and also continued pre-training on relevant data.
What kind of data?
They mention a distillation mix and something called Nemotron H. The goal is to make sure the different puzzle pieces work well together and to recover any quality loss during the optimization process.
And did it work?
Apparently so. Table 1 shows LN Ultra, after this phase, surpasses models like Llama 3.1405B on benchmarks like MMLU and Math 500.
Okay, let's talk about the data itself. A big part of this seems to be synthetic data curation. How do they generate the training data, especially for reasoning?
This is super interesting. They put a huge emphasis on generating high-quality data for mathematical reasoning, coding, science, and general instruction following. For the reasoning data, the stuff used when detailed thinking is on, they had specific pipelines.
Like for math?
For math, they sourced problems from places like AOPS forums, classified them, extracted answers, carefully removed any benchmark questions to avoid contamination. Then they use models like DeepSeek R1 and Quinn 2.5 to generate step-by-step solutions, tagged with reasoning markers, and filtered those solutions for quality.
Wow, quite involved. Similar process for coding and science.
Pretty much, yeah. Collecting problems from competitive programming sites or scientific sources, checking for contamination, using strong models to generate solutions with reasoning steps, and then heavy post-processing and filtering.
And for general instruction following?
A mix of synthetic prompts and real-world ones, again using DeepSeek R1 for initial responses, but then filtering those responses using a reward model to pick the best ones. They also used a system called feedback edit inference timescaling for some high-quality, open-ended responses.
Okay, so that's the detailed thinking on data. What about the off data, the standard chat mode?
For that, they paired prompts from the reasoning dataset, but generated concise answers using models like Llama 3.1 Nemotron 70B or Llama 3.370B. So same questions, different answer style.
Clever. So they're explicitly training both modes. Table 2 shows the data breakdown.
Yeah, it shows how much data they curated for each domain: math, code, science, general, and the split between reasoning on and non-reasoning off examples.
All right, so they have the efficient architecture, they have the carefully curated data. Next step is supervised fine-tuning, SFT.
Right. SFT is where you take the pre-trained model and fine-tune it on this specific instruction response data. This is key for transferring those reasoning capabilities and teaching the model the desired response style, including how to react to the detailed thinking on-off toggle.
What's the general approach?
Pretty standard stuff, mostly. Token-level cross-entropy loss, mixing the reasoning and non-reasoning data, atom optimizer, learning rate schedules. But they did have some model-specific tweaks.
Like what?
For LN Nano, the small one, they did it in 3 stages, focusing first on reasoning data, then mixed data, then more on chat, instruction following, and tool use.
Ah, staged learning.
Yeah. LN Super was simpler, just a single pass over the full dataset. LN Ultra needed sequence packing for efficiency and careful learning rate adjustments because large models can be unstable during fine-tuning.
Okay, SFT gets them pretty far. Yeah. But the paper talks a lot about reinforcement learning, especially for LN Ultra. Why RL?
So SFT is great for learning from demonstration, but RL allows the model to potentially surpass the performance of the models that generated the initial training data. It learns by trial and error, guided by rewards.
Getting beyond the teacher model.
Exactly. For LN Ultra, they used a technique called Group Relative Policy Optimization, or GRPO. They'd give the model prompts, let it generate multiple possible answers, and then reward the better ones.
What kind of rewards?
2 main types. Accuracy rewards, basically, was the answer correct. They use another model, Llama 3.370B, to judge correctness for things like math and coding.
Okay, using an AI judge.
And also format rewards. Did the model correctly use the think tags when detailed thinking was requested? This reinforces the control mechanism.
Interesting. Any other RL details?
They pre-processed the data to make it harder, focusing on problems the SFT model struggled with. And they used curriculum learning, starting with easier problems and gradually increasing the difficulty, guided by the model's success rate. Figure 6 actually shows this progression.
That sounds computationally intensive.
Oh, hugely. They mention 140,000 H100 GPU hours just for the RL phase on Ultra. They used a sophisticated stack, Nemo Aligner, VLLM for fast generation, Megatron LM for training, all running on dozens of GPU nodes. They also specifically mentioned using FP8 precision during inference generation in RL, which gave significant speedups.
Wow. Okay, so that was RL for reasoning. Any other RL used?
Yep. They also did RL for preference optimization, using an algorithm called RLOO to specifically boost instruction following for both Super and Ultra, and standard RLHF reinforcement learning from human feedback, although here using AI feedback to improve general helpfulness and chatability. They used iterative RPO or GRPO with the Llama 3.1 Nemotron 70B reward model and the Help Steer 2 dataset.
And this helped.
Apparently so. They highlight LN Super achieving a very impressive score of 88.3 on Arena Hard, which measures helpfulness against other top models.
Okay, so a multi-stage process. Architecture search, data curation, SFT, multiple phases of RL. Quite the pipeline. How did the final models perform on the main benchmarks?
They evaluated across a range of reasoning benchmarks: AIM, GPQA Diamond, Live Code Bench, Math 500, and non-reasoning ones like IFEVL for instruction following, BFCL for tool use, and Arena Hard for chat.
And the results.
LN Nano, despite its 8B size, showed strong reasoning performance, which they attribute to the SFT and data curation. LN Super was competitive across the board, a good balance. They noted a slight underperformance on one live code bench version due to dataset timing, but generally strong. And LN Ultra, well, it matched or outperformed all existing open weight models on these benchmarks. State of the art among open models on GPQA Diamond, for example. The RL phase was clearly critical for pushing it beyond the SFT limits.
But Ultra really is the top open reasoning model based on these tests.
Based on their evaluations, yes. And one last interesting evaluation point. They tested the models on Judge Bench.
Judge Bench, what's that?
It tests how well an LLM can act as a judge, evaluating the quality of other AI responses. It's an out-of-distribution task for them.
And how did they do?
Surprisingly well. The Llama Nemotron models outperformed top proprietary and open source models as judges, with LN Ultra being the best open source judge on that benchmark.
Huh. So they're good at reasoning and good at evaluating reasoning.
Seems like it. It suggests a deeper level of understanding.
Okay, let's try to wrap this up. We've covered a lot. What are the key takeaways for someone listening? What's the bottom line on Llama Nemotron?
I think the bottom line is that this series offers a really compelling package. You get strong, arguably state-of-the-art reasoning for open models, but combined with significant improvements in inference efficiency. Plus, you have that unique user control with the reasoning toggle, and it's all released under a permissive open license.
And the how is just as important, right? The puzzle framework, the meticulous data generation, the large-scale SFT and RL.
Absolutely. It's a showcase of advanced techniques coming together. It demonstrates the power of synthetic data when done carefully, and how crucial RL is becoming for pushing performance boundaries.
So for you, the listener, this deep dive hopefully gives you a solid handle on a major step forward. These aren't just incremental improvements. They represent a shift towards more practical, adaptable, and powerful open-source AI.
I agree. The blend of capability, efficiency, control, and openness is what makes Llama Nemotron stand out.
All right, here's a final thought to leave you with. Given this combination, highly capable reasoning, much better efficiency, fine-grained control via the toggle, and open access, what kinds of new applications could this unlock? Especially in enterprise settings where cost, reliability, and explainability are key. What happens when this level of AI becomes widely deployable? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. The possibilities are exciting.
Thanks for diving deep with us.